Welcome, everybody. Welcome to United Lodge of Theosophists, San Diego. Tonight, the title of the presentation is The Arrow of Self, and that is going to be given to us by our own Shobha Sharma. Okay, there is a reading we'd like to do to introduce Shobha and her talk, The Arrow of Self. It's called Pranava, and it's from the Mundaka Upanishad. Having taken as a bow the great weapon of the secret teaching, one should fix in it the arrow sharpened by constant meditation, drawing it with a mind filled with that, Brahman. Penetrate, O bright youth, that immutable mark. The Pranava Om is the bow. The arrow is the self. Brahman is said to be the mark. With heedfulness, it is to be penetrated. Become one with it as the arrow in the mark. Know that self alone, the one without a second, one which are strung heaven and earth, inner space, mind, vital energy, all the organs. Leave off other words, for this is the bridge to immortality. Thank you. We give to you our very own Shobha Sharma.
Thank you so much, Monica. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, beautifully.
Okay, good. As Monica so beautifully rendered this piece from the Mundaka Upanishad, I think it comes in the second chapter or second part. Now, the concept of using a bow and arrow implies accuracy, poise, precision, balance, and equilibrium, and so much more. The image of Arjuna, the amazing archer, trained by an even more amazing teacher, Drona, comes to mind. In elementary school, I had a book, and there was a section in this book about the story of Arjuna. And I do remember vividly a picture of him showing his remarkable skills. On the floor was a bowl of water, reflecting a fish rotating in a disc up above. What did Arjuna do? Arjuna looked at the image down below, but aimed his arrow at the mark above, and sure enough, he hit the rotating fish accurately. What poise, balance, and equilibrium he embodied in that act. Today we have trapeze artists. We have divers and gymnasts in the Olympics, to name a few, exhibiting these remarkable skills. But this same Arjuna loses balance, discipline, poise, and equilibrium when he suddenly faces his family and friends fighting against each other in the Kurukshetra war. What happens to him? He becomes completely off balance, bewildered, confused, and despondent. Fortunately for him, his Sarathi, or driver of his chariot, is the great Lord Krishna, who gives him the advice of 18 chapters of the Gita that allows him to completely change his perspective and literally and figuratively sees the light. Before I get any further, it would be wonderful to read all the quotations that are connected with today's topic. The first one is from the Gupta Vidya, volume 3. It says, Motive determines morality in the metaphysical sense. The rate of vibration of one's spiritual volition and degree of selfhood. I'm going to be talking about these things. Let me see if I can get this properly. The first one is from Helen Valborg, The Arrow. That is the second one I'm reading. The life of one who bends his desires in one direction only produces an arrow capable of hitting a mark. But it is only when constant meditation upon the highest spiritual goal imaginable takes place that one can enliven the arrow of the highest self. The next reading is again from Helen Valborg in the section called The Arrow. The release or letting go is like loving without an object, placing the self, the smaller self, in that bigger self, which will speak to the heart of Brahman. Only he who is empty of self, lower self, is ready to become one with the transcendent deity. And finally, we have William Quant Judge from an article in the Theosophical Articles called Hit the Mark, where he says, we must have a high mental and spiritual aim if we are to hit high. We cannot go quite as high as the aim, but have to thus allow for the trajectory that comes about from the limitations of our nature. Okay, all this is fine, but we need to deal with what happens around us today. Today, all of us see chaos, the rule of worldly law turned upside down, with deportations, incarcerations, and killing around us and all over the world. Sometimes we are forced to ask questions like accuracy, precision, poise, balance, and equilibrium now? Why? Of what use are these qualities when I want to either just hide my head in the sand or get frightened by the hot tears of pain all around me and within me? Let us hope that today's subject will help throw some light and wisdom to guide us in these times. Let us go back to the Mundaka Upanishad. But before I go there, let me spend a few minutes defining the position and the importance of the Upanishads in Hindu texts. First of all, it is necessary to realize that when one talks about the Hindu religion, it has 6 schools of philosophy. But the religion itself is usually considered to be represented by the 4 Vedas. And the 4 Vedas are the Rig, the Sama, the Yajur, and the Atharva Vedas. They comprise the rules, rituals, mantras, and tantras. Now, within them, there are 108 Upanishads with these 4 Vedas. What is the meaning of the word Upanishad? Upa means near the teachers. Ni means clarity. And Shad is the elimination, destruction of ignorance. The Mandukya and the Mundaka Upanishads, they sound so similar, but they are related, are in the Atharva Veda, while the Katha Upanishad, which most of us know about, comes from the Yajur Veda. So the 108 Upanishads are spread among these 4 Vedas. Embedded like diamonds are the Upanishads, which expound on the philosophy of Hinduism and talk beyond the ritualistic world and goes into the other world, beyond. So here, initially, with the ritualism, we are talking about Apara Vidya, while the other is talking about Para Vidya, which is beyond. This is exactly what the Mundaka Upanishad is talking about. The regular knowledge of the world, Aparavidya, as well as the knowledge dealing with the eternal Paravidya. After expounding the lineage of several rishis in the Mundaka Upanishads, that's how it starts, we hear a discourse between Saunaka and Angiras Rishi. In fact, Angiras Rishi is also included in the lineage. The Upanishad is made up of 3 parts. The first part deals with the difference between the lower and the higher knowledge, Apara and Paravidya respectively. To make it clearer, the Apara Vidya or worldly knowledge is what is being stated in the Vedas to do the rituals, do the prayers, etc., to get worldly reward. Let me have good crops. Let my family be healthy, etc., etc. This is the Saguna doctrine of worship and reward. The para or higher knowledge is the not all that, not all this, the neti neti doctrine approach or the nirguna approach. In fact, the question asked by Saunaka, who is the grahastha, which is the householder, to the teacher Angiras, starts the whole explanation. And what is that question? What is that through which, if it is known, everything else becomes known? That is the question. Rishi Angiras defines and clarifies both kinds of vidya or knowledge and says in this first part that apara vidya of kama, desire, pleasure, and artha, welfare, leads one to come back several times to earth and continue the circle of life and death. All the rituals and Vedic rites only give you momentary satisfaction. You can only break this cycle or circle by searching and living the life necessary to reach the para vidya and not stick to the apara vidya. This reminds me of the words in the Bhagavad Gita that says, those who go to the gods, go to the gods. Those who worship me, come unto me. The difference between the apara and the paravidya. Angiras Rishi also adds, just as a spider spins out and holds the threads of the web, just as the plants sprout forth out of the earth, just as hair grow on the head and body of the man who lives, similarly, everything that is here arises out of the imperishable one. He emphasizes that sacrifice and pious words are useless and states that men go round and round, staggering to and fro, the blind led by the blind. So, right at the outset, the keynote is struck to say that get beyond the Vedas, and how interesting that it is, all this is embedded within the Vedas. So, the first part states that spiritual knowledge releases and liberates man, and that perishable knowledge and acts cannot lead to eternal knowledge. It encourages seekers to gain knowledge from spiritual teachers or gurus focused on Brahman. So much of this echoes the statements of Shankaracharya in the Crest Jewel of Wisdom, right at the initial verses. Now we come to the second part. The second part talks about Brahman as the inner self of all beings. It talks about everything, including the sun, moon, and the whole universe coming from Brahman. Now, Brahman can be equivalent to Parabrahm that H.P. Blavatsky talks about in the first fundamental, and we'll come to that later. And then it continues in this second section to say that true wisdom comes from understanding the lower self and raising its unity with Brahman. The very first reading done at the beginning is talking about the bow and arrow and the mark. This verse offers an aid to the meditation process with the secret word. This is a beautiful conversation between pupil and teacher. I think it behooves us to read it again. Let me go back to the beginning and just remind us of what Monica read. Having taken as a bow the great weapon of the secret teaching, one should fix in it the arrow sharpened by constant meditation. Drawing it with a mind filled with that, Brahman, penetrate, O bright youth, that immutable mark. The pranava, Om, is the bow, the arrow is the self. Brahman is said to be the mark. With heedfulness, it is to be penetrated. Become one with it as the arrow in the mark. Know that self alone, the one without a second, on which are strung heaven and earth, inner space, mind, vital energy, all the organs. Leave off other words, for this is the bridge to immortality. So it behooves us to read it again because there is so much of wealth in these words. Now we come to the third and final part of the Mundaka Upanishad, which starts with the allegory of the two birds, which probably a lot of us know about. Two birds, inseparable birds, cling to the same tree. One of them eats the sweet fruit, the other looks on without eating. On the same tree, man sits grieving, drowned in sorrow, bewildered, feeling helpless. But when he sees the other bird, the second bird, Isha, he is content. He knows his glory. His grief passes away. When the seer sees the brilliant maker and Isha as the Purusha, who has his source in Brahman, then he is wise. He shakes off good and evil. Stainless, he reaches the highest oneness. So, the two birds are interpreted as the lower self and the higher self, respectively. Shankaracharya talks about the non-dualistic interpretation of this passage. He states that man reaches supreme equality, which is identity with the Brahman. This is achieved by meditation and different parts of yoga. He is no longer subject to the bonds of life or samsara and is beyond grief, ignorance, decay, and death. He becomes absolved from grief and is absorbed. Seated in every living thing, he truly lives and sees the unity of all. Finally, this Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad, talks about the importance of the practice of ethics, without which there is no liberation. The continuous practice of satya or truth is imperative. The phrase Satyam eva jayate is well known here in India. Perhaps its best translation today would be truth ultimately triumphs. One of the meanings of the word mundaka refers to the shaving or the removal of past ideas and habits if one wants to seek the truth. Let us look at the other Upanishad in the Atharva Veda, the Mandukya Upanishad. Very interesting Upanishad. It is the shortest of all the Upanishads. It has about 12 short prose paragraphs. It discusses the syllable Om, talks about the 3 and 4th states of consciousness, that is Jagrat, waking, Shwapna, dreaming, Shushupti, beyond awareness, and Turiya, complete, true awareness. Om is akin to Brahman, or what H.P. Blavatsky calls Parabrahm, while laying out the first fundamental on page 14 of the proem of the first volume of The Secret Doctrine. She says, A, an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression. In the words of the Mandukya, unthinkable and unspeakable. Interestingly, the Mandukya Upanishad may be short, but not so sweet to comprehend, just like our first fundamental proposition. In fact, this is Vedanta in its truest form because it inspired Shankaracharya's teacher, Gaudapada, to write a classic called the Gaudapada Mandukya Karika. Also, it is intriguing to see connections between Buddhism and this form of Hinduism. One of the 6 schools of Hindu philosophy, Vedanta, also interpreted as the Ant or the end of the Vedas. What is most interesting is how both these Upanishads, the Mundaka Upanishad and the Mandukya Upanishad, are so intimately connected. The Mandukya Upanishad lays out the Brahman like our first fundamental, and the Mundaka Upanishad talks about the process of getting there. But all this talk of going beyond needs to happen while we are here in this world. What a contradiction. Dealing with the needs of working, getting a paycheck, taking care of the family, and yet reaching for the stars. A beautiful story in the book 5 Years of Theosophy, which I have probably talked about several times, illustrates this concept. Under the title of contemplation, Mr. Damodar Mavalankar, who was associated with the Theosophical movement and then became a mystic, he explains the real meaning of contemplation. He states that just as we purify our external body to prevent disease and infection, it is imperative that we work with the other sheets of the lower quaternary. And he says, so also the inner man requires an unremitting watch, so that no conscious or unconscious thought may attract atoms unsuited to its progress. This is the real meaning of contemplation. The prime factor in the guidance of the thought is will. And we must remember that will is akin to buddhi. And then comes this most important passage for me from the Elixir of Life that is quoted in this contemplation article, which is a separate, actually, the Elixir of Life is a separate article in the 5 Years of Theosophy. And he quotes saying, without that will, all else is useless. And to be efficient for the purpose, it must be not only a passing resolution of the moment, a single fierce desire of short duration, but a settled and continued strain, as nearly as can be continued without one single moment of remission. So very important. Mr. Mavalankar states, wallowing in the mire of exotericism, he, the student, knows not what it is to live in the world and yet be not of the world. In other words, to guard higher self against lower self is an almost incomprehensible axiom for the profane. And then he gives this example of King Janaka living the life in the world of affairs of the state and yet be not of the world. His detractors cannot believe he can do it. So he does an experiment with his detractors. He makes them carry pots of water and walk down the streets of the city without spilling a drop of water, while he creates endless distractions in the streets. He says that if they spill any water, their heads would be cut off. In fear, they concentrate so much on not spilling that they come back successfully with full pots. However, when King Janaka asked them about the singing and dancing of beautiful girls in the streets, they have no awareness of that. So now they understand that the king too was in the world and not of the world. In other words, his inward aspirations were leading him on continually to the goal in which his whole inner self was concentrated. Thus, he proves it with the experiment. Let us end this talk by looking at William Coin Judge's article called Meditation, Concentration, and Will. Again, he echoes some of the same ideas from Mr. Mavalankar's article. He says, let us divide meditation into two sorts. First is the meditation practiced at a set time or an occasional one, whether by design or by physiological idiosyncrasy. Second is the meditation of an entire lifetime, that single thread of intention, intentness, and desire running through the years stretching between the cradle and the grave. The mysterious, subtle thread of life meditation is that which is practiced at every hour by philosopher, mystic, saint, criminal, artist, artisan, and merchant. So the question becomes then, what is the motive? Why do we do what we do? He continues the article by talking about how to shape our will to be strong by having fewer desires connected to the sense and sensory objects. Once again, trying to align ourselves with the buddhi. So to make our will strong, he says, we must have fewer desires. Let those be high, pure, and altruistic. They will give us strong will. He adds these key words. If we do all our acts, small and great, every moment, for the sake of the whole human race, as representing the Supreme Self, then every cell and fiber of the body and the inner mantilla will be turned in one direction, resulting in perfect concentration. So here is the poise, the grace, the agility, leading to equilibrium and balance. Then we can look at the world's suffering as part of our own suffering and stop running away or just shed tears. Action is continuing with the purest of motives, leading us to the ever-present Brahman. And one day we will surely hit the mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobha. Thank you very, very much. Let me let somebody in here. So you've really taken us into these very ancient and classical works and brought them into the present day. And you've clarified the difference between Mandukya and Manduka. I don't know if I did that right. And the Mandukya was the one that's got that pure Vedanta, if I remember right. And that's why she includes that in her treatise on the first fundamental. HPV does, because the first fundamental is really the purest Vedanta, the purest expression of Vedanta that there could possibly be, it seems like. But it's also a pure expression of all systems. That's very mysterious about how she does that first fundamental. And then you have the Manduka, and that's the one that I think, as you said, it helps us with our life in the world, really, and basically that kind of metapsychology of the position of the aspirant and the ultimate goal of becoming one with Brahman. Is that something of an understanding of what's going on?
Yeah, I know. It's so hard. They both sound so alike.
Yeah.
The Mandukya is the one that lays out like the first fundamental, and the Mundaka, it's the Mundaka, M-U, it's a U sound. Mundaka is the one that explains the process, how to
Okay.
reach Brahman. Yeah, and that beautiful quotation that you gave me from the Mundaka is so so lovely, because it literally hits the mark of what's being meant by the arrow of self. Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful summary. Thank you.
Yes, and in that, you've got the idea of what the pranava is, what the bow is, and well, speaking of that, what was the bow again? That's the AUM?
The bow is the self, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's the self, yeah. Om. Oh, sorry, it's the Om. I'm being corrected here by my cousin. She's right. Let me go back and look at it. Yeah. The bow, hold on. Let's go back to that. The bow penetrate the bright. Yeah, the pranava Om is the bow. So you are focusing on that, and you're letting the arrow of the self. The problem with this is that you have to remember it's the higher self. It is with a capital S. So the bow is the pranava which you are focusing on.
Yeah.
Everything which is all encompassing. And then the self, the higher self, is in union. Again, I think of Shankaracharya's unity he talks about. And then you can hit the mark of the Brahman, the Parabrahm, right? So the mark is the Parabrahm.
So the fact that the arrow really is the higher self, is that part of the explanation about why it can actually become one with Brahman?
Yes, there is a possibility of getting there. It's a long struggle, but it can be done. Because unless you have the right motive, like H.P. Blavatsky constantly says, all this is of no avail. All these rituals, which is why it is so beautiful that the Mundaka Upanishad starts out by saying, what is the higher goal? What is the lower goal? I mean, the lower goal is what we are all struggling with every day. You know, how do we balance that? The story of King Janaka helps us with that. And how do we reach it's constant. Whether it is Mr. Mavalankar who says it, Damodar Mavalankar, or whether Mr. William Conjad says it, they're all saying the same thing. Just remember, just closing the door and saying a few minutes of concentration is not going to get you there. It's a line of life's meditation. And that is the hardest part for all of us. Nobody says it's easy. No wonder we keep coming back, right? We keep coming back because the nidanas pull us back. You know, the thirst for life brings us back. And we do that because we are still caught up in the lower self. Yeah, you're right. That's the need for the higher self is so critical and the concentration on this all-encompassing word is pranava in all its manifestations, in all its complexities. That is the only way to reach, and that can only happen by living the life, which is H.P. Blavatsky is so clear about it, especially when we read her last book. I think it was her last book, Key to Theosophy. She says all this talk is of no use if we don't live the life.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. So this is your big chance to raise your hand, anybody in the audience, either here in the lodge or online, to get more clarification about this incredible Upanishadic wisdom. Judy
Yes,
Spokesman.
Judy.
Hello,
Hi, Judy.
hello, Shobha. Thank you for your talk. Yes, in the metaphor in the article by Judge, he talks about how you, and I've done archery myself, you have to aim
Oh,
arrow much
yes,
higher than your target if you're
right.
any distance from the target. And of course, the further away you higher you have to aim. Now, there's clearly a very clear
Yeah.
metaphor in life about this, and I wonder if you could address it.
Yeah. Well, I think that first verse, Judy talks so clearly. I'm so happy to hear that you know about archery, because I remember watching. We were on a cruise and we watched young adults trying to. They had the most difficult time stringing the arrow in the bow. That itself was hard for them. Can you imagine how much grace and poise you need, and balance, to get that first strung in the bow and then letting it off? And that requires a skill too, right? You should know that, Judy, because you have the background in that. I was not very good at any of these things growing up. That a hand coordination, that focus, and the brilliance of Arjuna hitting a mark which is not directly being seen. Isn't that amazing? It's almost like you are not looking at it, yet you are with a different eye, right? With the mind's eye, and you are able to hit it by just looking at the image. What amazing skill it is. And yeah, it requires. I think of trapeze artists. I think of gymnasts who are on that narrow beam, trying to get all their movements done accurately, and many of them fail. Even in the Olympics, we've seen disasters happen. That complete concentration, that complete focus is a difficult thing, Judy. Do you want to add anything else? Do you think you have anything more to add to that?
No, I think you said it all, but I think the idea is we do need to aim higher than we're actually going to land.
It's a good.
But we
Yes.
mustn't be disappointed because we can go on from there.
Right. It also brings to mind page 40 of the Secret Doctrine, volume 1, where she talks about the need. It's a series of progressive awakenings. So the higher we aim, the better it is, because there's always something we are learning. It's a series, and it's not that we reach shunyata or moksha or liberation like this. It doesn't happen. It's a long struggle, but hey, aiming high is great. When we talk to students in our classes, when we teach, one of the things we say to students is, don't think of yourself as someone who cannot do this. You can do this, and you can do more. But there is also that zone of proximal development where students can and will be able to achieve. If it is too difficult, it's beyond them. But if it is too easy, they get bored. So they have to be. That's why I love when William Conjard says, hit the mark. You have to be accurate. The aiming high is important, but the accuracy is critical.
What would be the symbolism of the gravity in the analogy?
Gravity, yeah. How do we overcome it and do it, right? That's what's happening, right? Many of these actions that gymnasts do and everything seems like they're overcoming gravity. There's ice skating and all that too. I mean, the kind of spinning and everything that goes on. Yep, there is that piece too. Isn't that remarkable? The defying. It just goes to show a better understanding of the laws of nature and better control over them. See, the process of uh, meditation, all the different forms of meditation, and leads one to illumination only. And in the process, you have a better idea of the laws of nature, right?
Yep.
You understand and apply them. You can't just enter into them without the purification of the lower quaternary, which is so important that both the Damodar Mavalankar, Mr. Damodar Mavalankar, and Mr. Judge talk about. So the purification process, getting the instruments ready is critical. Actually, to live to benefit mankind is the first step, and then the practicing the virtues, as the voice says. All of that is necessary. If there isn't that feeling of unity, the feeling that we are part of it, we see people suffering, we need to understand it is part of us. Why is it that we always get worried when things go wrong in the family? And why is it that we don't get more, what is the word I'm looking for, empathetic when we see suffering in the world? We shed a few tears and then we go on with our lives, right? Where is that continuous feeling of caring that is there among the great ones who come back periodically, like Shankaracharya says, like spring to help mankind? They come back. They don't want to sit in their nirvana. They don't sit there.
But David has the answer to your question.
Okay, David, go ahead.
No answer, but maybe you had the answer to my question already. I was wondering, how do we? What's the process of sharpening the arrow?
Yeah. It's many lives, isn't it? This life
It seems like cultivating what you were just saying, the virtues and acting and learning that. I guess that's when we sharpen the arrow. So
yes, yes, that's a beautiful thing, to sharpen the arrow. Yes. And how do we do that? Yeah, it's a total life. And I really think the voice says a lot of things that we really need to ponder on. Unless we feel the unity of all, which is what the first object of the Theosophical movement, forming a nucleus of universal brotherhood and sisterhood. Without that, all the virtues, even cultivating, makes no sense without that fundamental baseline, right? Yeah. And then the arrow gets sharpened and everything happens. Yeah. It's an amazing analogy of the bow and arrow, because it's a tough road, and we acknowledge it and we move on. We can't get wallowing in that. I love that verse in the third part of the Mundaka Upanishad, where the two birds and man sitting there sorrowfully till he sees the wonderful thing that the second bird is doing, not getting affected emotionally. Go beyond that, get affected on a different level.
Actually, I have another, if I can, since
Sure.
You're reminding, like Judy was saying, growing up, I also did a lot of archery.
Oh.
And I wasn't very good at it. So I'm wondering, using the metaphor, if we're taking aim and we have the bow and string drawn, and we're aiming at the bullseye and the target, and then we let go, but the arrow goes astray. So how do we learn to, what can we learn from that and reorient ourselves to do better next time to
Well,
get the
well, it's
target
like
better?
go ahead, go ahead.
No,
How do you?
right.
Well, I think of every athlete, every person who has an art, whatever. It could be an artist, a sculptor, even somebody who does quilts, whatever, a hand, whatever they do. One has to really work at it again and again, right? How do athletes become better?
I think the word yoga.
Yeah.
And what is this?
Yeah,
Keep
well,
the mind-
my cousin's telling me something, and I think that's wonderful. The word yoga embodies that. Remember, I think we.
Yoking them.
Yeah, the yoga, in the true sense of the term, is a form of devotion. Actually, when you look at the translation in the Bhagavad Gita by William Conjudge, he uses the word devotion, a true form of devotion, which is also concentration, which is also contemplation, which is also union with the will, which is union with the buddhi, right? So all that takes time and effort, failures and success, failures, success. It takes time. And so there is that diligence that needs to be there. There needs to be the vigilance of the Dhammapada, the diligence, and the continuous trying. Yes, yoga is, and it talks about it in one of the, was it what Shankaracharya said or somebody in my talk? I talk about the yoga also being there, and that I look at it as concentration, devotion in the true sense of the word. So all that needs to go together. Of course, there will be failures. I watch my grandson. He is 14 now. He loves baseball, but he practices every single day. And my son says, I love his discipline. I wasn't as disciplined, though I love baseball, he said. And this kid goes and every day spends time practicing, strengthening his body, to make sure he can do all the different acts as a baseball player. So I think we need to do the same thing. Every time we make a nasty remark or we do something that we feel ashamed of at the end of the day, that's when we sit down and say, oh, that was bad. I need to rethink how I respond to people. Or the thoughts, right? Many times we may not even say it, but we're thinking it. So all that self-examination and that self-improvement, it's a continuous process, which is what I love about what Mr. Damodar Mavalankar and both and William Conjad say. It's not a one-day affair. It's not short duration, and so it tells us that the road is hard and thorny, but it can be done. How did the great ones get there, right? And they were also once like us, right? So
We've got a question. We've got a question
Yes.
here in the lodge.
yes,
I don't know whether it's a proper question, but anyway,
Oh, it's already, can already tell it's not going to be proper.
between thinking about today's population, the young children today,
Yeah.
kids today, whatever. I look at the comparison between a gun and a bow and arrow.
Okay.
Both have the same purpose, both take the same skill and so
Okay.
forth. Is there a comparison that you can use today to get kids interested in the concept that we're talking about in comparing the two of them? Is it too crass? I don't know. It's just a.
What do you think, Shobha?
Oh, the comparison between the gun and the bow and arrow?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the simplest thing that I can think of, which my father used to say, is how are we using it? Right?
Correct. Worth-
That's the
That's
ultimate
either-
thing.
That's either one, though, correct? They're both
Yeah.
made to kill. That's what they do. And so they both have the same concept for people that are using them.
Yes.
I'm wondering how to be able to get kids today interested when they know these terms already. They already know what guns are, they know what bows are, but they're more interested in guns, they're more interested in what they do. So how do you compare the two of them so that they can understand?
Well,
that?
Yeah, I think of the gun, the bow and arrow, a knife in the same way. You can use a knife to cut vegetables and meat or whatever when you're cooking. You could also use it to kill somebody, right? And you can do the same thing with guns. Guns are not bad in themselves, which they are right, those who support that. However, it's the person behind the gun that is the problem. What is the motive? See, it all comes down to the motive, isn't it? What are you using your instruments for, right? You could use a hatchet to cut a tree to have um, wood, not cut all trees, but cut, for your fuel. But you could also use a hatchet for other purposes that are gruesome, right? So I think it all comes down to that. The bow and arrow, too, can be used to kill people indiscriminately, and it was probably used, has been used. What probably? Same thing with a gun. So ultimately, these instruments are not bad by themselves. It's how we use them. So whether it's a gun, whether it's a bow and arrow, whether it's a knife or a hatchet or whatever, uh, our use of it is critical.
So it's important then to make sure that when you're talking about the bow and arrow and the purposes that we're using for this discussion, to begin by first explaining how to use it, why you're using it.
Exactly. Yes, it's a very good point. Yeah, if people can't hear the comment, it was said that the first thing to be taught to children who are learning how to use these instruments is what they should be used for, and not used indiscriminately. Yeah. So it's a hard thing, all these things. Oh, hi, Desiree.
Hello. Oh, here, you can see me. Thank you, Shobha. That was beautiful. And I really appreciate the fact that you brought up yoga
Yeah.
and the act of devotion. I wanted to, could you explain the difference between practice, which we know is important for any skill, but the difference between practice mechanically and practice with devotion?
Well, wonderful, Desiree. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the key. How are we practicing? What is the purpose? There are people who go to the Olympics because they want to win the gold, right? Right? There's the motive there. But you could go to the Olympics and say, I want to do my best. I want to make sure that I understand this skill, apply it correctly, and they could still win the gold or not. But it doesn't matter. It's for the sake of perfection. We watch a lot of people in the Olympics. They're amazing. Not all of them win, right? But they're all amazing. So I think this thing about how we learn any skill, I always say this when I'm a person who uses a needle and thread a lot. That's something I do a lot because I use it a lot. I believe in, just like the Italians talk about slow cooking, I believe in slow stitching. And it's, and I watch something every time I thread the needle, right? It struggles to go in. It doesn't go in easily. And as my eyesight gets worse and worse, it's harder and harder to do this. But I spend a lot of time getting it in. It takes time. There are days when I want to just give up. But that's the same thing with people who practice, right? You can't give up. You need to keep on and on and on. And finally, the thread goes through that needle. That the eye of the needle is small. And if you're doing quilting, those things are even smaller, the eye. So it's a tough process, but the joy I feel when I get it in is immense. This silly task, but it makes me happy. Same thing I think about when the chrysalis, the little caterpillar is in the chrysalis and is dormant. and the butterfly struggles out. Don't help the butterfly. Don't help the butterfly. There's a movie in which I see this young girl helping the butterfly. Actually, it's terrible to do that because the butterfly gets its strength from that struggle, and the wings flutter and it flies away, and it has the strength. But the moment you help it, you have, sorry to say, killed it, because it comes out, it cannot fly, and it dies. So that struggle is important. The birth of a child is a struggle, right? The birth of any baby in the mammalian world, right, is a struggle. But that struggle needs to happen. So I think it's that's part of it. This trial and error, working it out, figuring it out. Again, we come to the second fundamental: self-induced and self-devised, right? So that I feel is the critical piece in all this.
I almost think that devotion even supersedes kind of a mechanical practice, because
Totally.
devotion means that in spirit I'm with you,
Yeah.
and there's a gratitude there that may not exist in everyday, mechanical types of practice.
Yeah.
There's, I think, a deeper respect and love, and I don't know, that devotion part of it, that yoga part of it, to me almost supersedes everything else, or is buffered by it. The practice is buffered by that.
Absolutely. That devotion is not a blind, it's not mechanical. That devotion is also seeing the unity of all things. That devotion encompasses everything, every act. Even when we clean the kitchen, if we do it with, oh God, I gotta do this kind of an attitude, versus, you know what? I have to do it with love.
Yeah.
The place looks nice if I do it. Or the cooking, or whatever you do, every act. And the Gita talks about it all the time. Renunciation of the fruits of action, but still do it with love, devotion.
Okay, we've got, maybe, David, can you hold off? We got actually, Thea here had a question here. Oh, and you got another one here. Okay, we got, all of a sudden we got, everybody's got their hand up here. So Thea?
I just thought I might contribute something constructive to the matter of the symbology of the arrow and the bow in semiotic terms. In terms of semiotics, is the primitive suggestibility of images, and the image of the arrow indicates a number of things. There's the fact that it has a point. There's the fact that it's straight and narrow. There's the fact that the feathers stabilize the arrow. There's the fact that the arrow is launched by a device that creates tension between 2 points in opposition. All of these things are very primitive notions that are not at all embodied in the image of a bullet. So consequently, I don't think that you're going to get the same kind of subliminal suggestibility that's caused by viewing the image of an arrow and in viewing the image of the bullet. The bullet has no semiotic significance at a primitive
Oh,
level.
okay, so this comment, I don't know if you were able to hear the whole thing. I was a little bit slow in bringing the microphone to the question answer, but it has to do with the difference in the analogy between an arrow and a bullet, bottom line. Well, because the bow and arrow has all kinds of symbolism that that really pertains to this spiritual thing, according to the questioner here. You have the condition of the bow, the straightness of the arrow. You have the way the feathers are, all at 60 degrees, right? And there's so much like that. Whereas, okay, but why not the bullet? Couldn't you come up with analogies like that for that? Like you have to clean the gun, I guess. There must be some kind of analogies there. I haven't thought them through, but there must be something through that. I'm actually playing devil's advocate. I'm kind of on your side here. So
I have no idea about a gun. I have never owned one. I know nothing about it, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I'm sure there's a process there for those who have guns. It's all an analogy. We can't cling to the analogy. It's just something that helps us understand what we are talking about. I'm sure we could do this with a gun too, because there's accuracy and aim and, focus, concentration, all that, devotion, everything is needed. The motive, blah, blah, that is so, it's all there. But so you can have an analogous process too with that. You may not have the same components, but you have different. And so I think it can be done, and can be done with anything. You can use any action. How do you pitch a ball in baseball? How do you hit it? All that. What accuracy. Today, the mathematics that's involved in all this is remarkable in sports. And they talk about the speed of the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, these things were not measurable earlier. Now they're measuring everything.
Yeah,
they talk about the percentage of winning in a game. And more or less, they seem to be hitting the mark in all this. So many nuances involved in. I always think of sports, but the same thing with dance and art and music, right? People who sing, poetry, the nuances. Why do we admire certain poets and we just feel so? It reaches, takes us to a place of. It's almost sublime, right?
Yeah.
So anything, art, science too, and the wonders of nature, everything. As we as humans mimic some of that, right? It's beautiful.
Well, thank you, Shobha, for that. And I have to say, it's a hybrid meeting here in the lodge, and today I've been having a hybrid participation because I listened to your talk while I was on Zoom on the computer, actually the phone, and now I'm here in the lodge in person. I was fascinated by you're comparing the two Upanishads, and then also tying it back to the first fundamental. And as a couple of people here, we've been talking about in the audience about this analogy of guns and arrows and whatnot. Looking at that Theosophy Trust article, which I'm presuming is by Helen Valborg, that you mentioned her in your initial talk at the beginning.
Yeah.
She mentions a couple things in that article, and one is a very elaborate drilling down on different kinds of arrows and different kinds of bows, and the way the person is standing, and different kinds of feathers on the bows, and all sorts of things. And then mentions a Zen quote, which I'm going to read here.
Absolutely.
And it goes as follows: as soon as we reflect, deliberate, and conceptualize, the original unconsciousness is lost as a thought interferes. We no longer eat while eating. We no longer sleep while sleeping. The arrow is off the string, but does not fly straight to the target, nor does the target stand where it is. So I think that was earlier, David was talking about his early life experience of, aiming, but then he didn't hit the target. And it sounds like the Zen guy is saying that, Zen master is saying, the Zen guy is saying that if you start thinking about it and conceptualize and come up with all these mental abstractions, you lose your unconscious sort of unity with the bow and arrow, or maybe even with the gun too, because there's a lot of details with different kinds of guns and different kinds of bullets, and the way you have to handle the recoil in your arm and that sort of thing. Then there's another comment, which I was wondering what you think about it when you were talking about everyday actions, like washing the dishes or whatnot. Valborg writes, the release or letting go of, in this case, the arrow, the release or letting go is like loving without an object, placing the self in that self, which will speed to the heart of Brahman. Because you're basically saying today that the whole goal here is to use the arrow of our lower self to reach to the higher self and to Brahman. And it sounds like we have to let go, like the Zen master was saying, of our conceptualizations. And then the whole idea of love without an object, that seems very difficult because we all want to love in person. And that to me, that relates to the story of the men who were charged with carrying the bowl of water, the vessel of water, without dropping a drop, or they'll have their head cut off, and who didn't notice the beautiful women. so loving without an object. How could you do that? I wonder if you have any thoughts about how we might practice loving without an object.
Well, this is again goes fabulous. Thank you so much for that, Ken. I think it goes back to something that the Gita also talks about again and again. Renunciation of the fruits of action, right? When you don't have people, this happens all the time. When we go to temples, I don't know if it happens in churches, but in the temples, you have these big plaques saying how much money this person donated to the church or the temple or whatever. Why? Why do you need all that? Who cares how much people said? I mean, if anything has any value, it's the story of the widow's mite, right? From Jesus' parables, right? Money, who cares? Who takes my purse, steals trash, says Shakespeare, right? Filthy lucre, right? Doesn't he say that somewhere? So I think ultimately all this doesn't matter. What matters is that quote from Helen Valberg is really very beautiful. Without an object. What does that mean? It's not, you're not doing it for somebody, you're doing it for the all, for everyone, the whole universe, right? So the act of cleaning the kitchen or washing the dishes or cleaning the toilet, a job that I hate, but I do it, is because it has to be done, right? It has to be done. And you feel good that you did it, even though the process may not be fun.
Yeah, afterwards.
Yes, right. So all these things are important. I think that's what it's talking about. If you, that's where your meditation is. That's where your devotion is. It's there. And then when you look at your life, when you look at your day, you can say, okay, that was better. It could have been done better. Or, oh, I shouldn't have done that, right? That daily examination that we do. And that's also a meditation. That's also a contemplation. And that's vital. Like a good teacher always reviews his or her class and says, did I do this right? Could I have done better? It's the same thing. So I think anybody who does their task, I'm just giving an example of a teacher.
We have a question from Marion.
Yes.
I was just going back to a lot has been talked about the mechanical or necessary posture, how to draw the bow, placement of the feet. I did also study some archery when I was younger, and also in Pathfinders. And I think if you think about that moment when you let go of the you're drawing it, the bow, and then you let go, and it's kind of that's a time when there's utter silence in your mind. There should be, because everything that you've been thinking about so far, as Zoba has been talking about, it takes a tremendous amount of practice. But then all of those steps that you're trying to put in your conscious mind, they kind of go back into the unconscious, and then there really is kind of a period of utmost concentration and awareness of your senses. It will become kind of that one with what you're doing that's been talked about. And so really there's a tremendous silence.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yes. Yeah, because all that things that were going on in your head have now been executed, right? And also, there is that complete trust when you let go of the arrow, right? That sense of complete trust. Whatever happens, it's done, right? So that is the thing. No more anxiety, nothing. It's done. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Marian.
Oh, thank
Well, I just had one question I'd like to end the things with. Shobha, what is this thing about the Kshatriya ideal in theosophy? Because if you think of HPB, she wasn't no wallflower, so to speak. She had a real fighting spirit, right? But even beyond the level of personality, this idea that there's something, well, William Q. Judge, you have that picture of him, of him doing archery, you know, and he wrote the article, Hit the Mark, and so forth. But there's this idea of the spiritual warrior, which is very common. But I was wondering if you could say something about that idea of the ideal, the Kshatriya ideal.
Yeah. Well, there has been a story about a Kshatriya because was it Karna or somebody who goes to learn and to learn everything, and he doesn't say he's a Kshatriya, but he has his. I think the head of the teacher is on his lap or something, and a bird attacks him. The Kshatriya ideal is to bear pain, right? And so that story is he lets the bird peck on his shoulder, and blood keeps coming. But he does not move lest the guru, the teacher, wakes up. And the guru wakes up because the blood falls on him, and he wakes up and he says, "You are not a Brahmin, you are a Kshatriya." He is upset about it. I don't remember if it was Karna or there is a story, somebody might remember it, but that's the Kshatriya ideal, to bear pain, to fight till the end, which is what Krishna advises him, right? In the end.
Yeah.
You need to do that, Arjuna. You can't be timid, you can't, and he explains the whole 18 chapters is about that. But that is the Kshatriya ideal. And I think we all need to, the fearless warrior. Remember that piece in The Voice of the Silence? The fearless warrior keeps coming back, right? Again and again to fight his enemy. That's the Kshatriya ideal. And every human being, what are the slings and arrows in our life? We have a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be something like somebody says something hurtful, or it could be a loss of a child. It could be a loss of anything, you know. It could be illness, terrible illness in the family. So how do we deal with it? And we come back and fight. That's the Kshatriya ideal that all of us need to be doing, which is exactly what all this meditation and contemplation articles, all of them are talking about.
Well, Shobha, it's been an incredible darshan listening to you, and I'm sure all of us feel the same. And let me mention what's going to be next week. It's going to be the fire of purgation, no less. So, so all of this kind of serious stuff will be going ahead and continuing. And so it's a very fine series that we have here, working with the Aquarian Almanac as we are. And we very much appreciate all of your attendance, and above all, Shobha, your beautiful, beautiful presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Now you can go back to sleep, Shobha. I'm just kidding.
No, not
Thanks for staying awake.
No, that's not what warriors like Shoba do, though, actually.
Oh,
Okay, all right.
All right. Have a good night, Jova.
bye.
I'm just gonna say one last
Thank you,
thing.
everyone. Thank you, Shoba.
What we were missing, what
Wait.
we need to be missing.
Good night.
Hey, Judy Saltzman, George Pasaltis here. How are you doing? You remember?
Yeah, I know this lady. We were together in Chicago. She's from India. Okay. Yeah, they closed down the meeting. Now I'm going to close down the computer.
Hold on. You familiar with her? She was at university at Cal Poly.